comic book movies have been padding the pockets of Hollywood studios for the last 15 years. But it really wasn't that long ago that terrible comic book movies, like Howard the Duck.
You know, this is beginning to seriously undermine my self-esteem.
Yeah, that little guy. And the dreadful Judge Dredd, pun intended, were dumped into theaters nationwide. Today, we're at Star Comics in Lubbock to talk to some experts who are on the crossroads between comics and movies. I'm here with Robert Mora, owner of Star Comics here in Lubbock. Robert, tell me a little bit about your store.
Star Comics has been here since 1977. It's one of the oldest comic book stores in the state of Texas. Not the oldest, but one of. We've been in the same location, and I've owned the store since 1999.
And the comic book industry has had some ups and downs. Since '99, has it been mostly on the up track?
It's been on a steady track
Been
for
on a
me,
steady
at
track?
least. Yeah, I mean, I think the recognition of comics as a viable medium and a way to storytell in an art form has definitely grown and gotten more respect than it had, say, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Definitely. And one of the, I'm a huge comic book fan, and I'm a huge movie fan. And in the last 15 years, we've really seen them meet up and make some great things. What are some of your favorite comic book adaptations that have become films?
I think some of the more popular ones have been the ones that Marvel have made, of course. But they've all been really good. They've done a much better job in the past 10 years of adapting the superhero genre, which is pretty much what we're talking about, to film. But, you know, then there have also been things like Ghost World, which was also a comic book, and Watchmen as well, which wasn't as superhero based, but it was more of an adaptation of an idea with the graphic novel Watchmen to bring it to the big screen. So
I'm a big fan of Road to Perdition, which many people
Exactly,
don't
yeah,
realize
that's
that was
another
a
good
graphic novel, and then it became a movie. It's one of my favorite movies, and it's a great graphic novel.
yeah, and it's
well.
another good example of something that started as a comic book, but people don't identify it because it's not in the superhero genre.
Do you feel like that artistry, you said that the artistry has gotten stronger, a little more creative. Does that have anything to do with the amount of money that's being made in Hollywood? Does that kind of help dump money back into the genre or into the comic book art?
Well, you look at the movie making process, and a lot of it's done in a storyboard fashion, and that's happened for years and years. Well, a storyboard is a comic book. They just don't necessarily put the word balloons and the dialogue in there, but they frame their shots in that particular order. There's a lot of money to be made in storyboarding. So a lot of artists have actually crossed that boundary and then crossed back. So it has made it a more respectable, and when I say respectable, I mean people can actually make money at it, which is for an artist is something that they're always trying to do. You know, when they explore their craft, they express themselves in their art, and then they make a living with it.
What are some of your favorite comic book series? Of all time, just comic. They don't have to have been made movies, but just some of your favorite comic book series.
I started off just loving Spider-Man, and so I'll always have an affection for Spider-Man. But I appreciate the comic book medium, and going outside the superhero genre is something that I explored in my young adulthood, and still to this day kind of. I still look more towards that than I do at the superhero genre, even though it does dominate the American comic book market.
There's been some people who are unsatisfied with the idea of going back and taking Alan Moore's Watchmen and doing the prequels as they're going to be. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think there are sacred cows in the comic book world?
No, I'm beyond that. I mean, maybe once you had asked me that question 20 years ago, I may have been one of the people that had my fist up in the air, and I may have already made a sign for you protesting it. But I'm beyond that. I mean, in the modern era, there is no sacred cow. I mean, if you can express yourself, and it's great to think that you can have an original idea, but those only come once in a blue moon, and to get yourself exposed and to get yourself out there, it's best to use already existing properties and things that people are familiar with, and maybe that will expose people to Watchmen that haven't seen it before. And I mean, I'm all for that, because anything to get people interested in comic books and the art form and understanding just what it is, that it's not just superheroes and scantily clad women or people beating each other up all the time, that there's more to it. Anything that can expose them to the medium, I'm all for.
And there's some great talent involved in that in the series, and I've seen some of the cover.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't judge a book by its
Yeah.
cover. But comic books you can a little more because that's what it is. But like the Rorschach cover is beautiful. It's wonderful. I mean, and they've got some of the best talent in the industry working on those. And so I agree. It's the same thing with like Batman. If there was a sacred cow, why couldn't it be Batman? Because they've drug him through all sorts of storylines that haven't been the greatest for his character.
Sure, absolutely. And you can look back at the Adam West television series and see that there obviously isn't a sacred cow for Batman. But yeah, the talent doesn't hurt. It might hurt a little bit more for some people, I think, if it didn't have names like Brian Azzarello and Darwin Cook on there.
It's a lot of fun just walking around the store. There are figurines from movies and comics, some nostalgic items too. In fact, you could probably get a full history lesson in comic books by just coming down for a visit. All right, I couldn't help myself. I've been an avid comic collector since I was about 5 years old, and I brought some of my most treasured property down here for you to take a look at. First up, we have, and keep this in mind, folks, they don't do this, so don't bring your comics down and get your. They've allowed me to bring a few so they could appraise them and we could talk about them a little bit, but they don't do it every day. So please don't rush down here with your comic book collection. But I'm very proud of this one. This is the NFL Super Pro, plays the game of his life. I love this. In the arena of death. Robert, could you tell me a little bit about this? Not the series, but what do you think that's worth in today's market?
Super Pro in today's market is worth. Did you see that dollar that's on there? Yeah, it's worth less than that.
Now, are there a lot of series that have actually devalued from their cover price?
Oh, very much so. It's a pulp medium. It really is. I mean, your mass market paperbacks, you don't expect them to actually appreciate and value. It's very similar to that. I think people have the misconception that just because it's a comic book, it's valuable. Just because it's a car doesn't make it valuable, but there are valuable cars.
Very true.
So it's very similar in comics as well. Just because it's a comic doesn't mean it's valuable.
Okay, next up. This is a favorite, and I bet it'd be worth more if I had the glasses, but we have the real Ghostbusters 3D. Now, the reason I brought the 3D one is because 3D has been something in movies that has come back to prominence. We've seen it come in and out, but obviously, 3D has gone through multiple art forms, and here's one in comic book form. This is 3D Slimer, the real Ghostbusters. What do you think that's worth?
Well,
I can't believe I paid $3 for that.
Yeah, you did pay $3 for it, and I can tell by looking at the shape of the book that you loved it a lot.
Yeah, in my collection, I'm not the type that collected them and put them in the sleeves and the hard plastic, and I read everything I own. So everything I own is on a sliding scale somewhere on the
those are the best comics to find, and whenever I do see collections, I like seeing the well-loved ones. You can see whatever the person's favorite was.
All right.
This one was well loved, and this one is worth
less than Super Pro.
Oh, less than Super Pro, but you got a lot of.
I did.
You got a lot for your $2.95.
I like that. Yeah, it's worth a lot to me. And then finally, I'm a giant Simpsons fan. Are you a giant Simpsons fan too?
Yes, I do.
And
like
this one has some history to it in the Simpsons world. This was the one that Martin, Bart, and Milhouse lost their friendship over because they all pitched in to buy this from the comic book guy. Do you do a comic book guy impression?
I do, but I'm not going to.
Oh, that's okay. We won't let you. But all right, okay. Tell me a little bit about this one. What do you think?
Radioactive Man. It's a great book. They made this after that actual episode aired. This was not a character that actually existed in comics. Prior to that happening.
Yeah, it's Simpsons world only.
It came after the fact, so they thought, well, let's make comics about Radioactive Man. And they've done several, and it's a lot of fun, and it's really funny because some of them will actually do the dollar price. This one's $1.95. Some of them will do the price in cents, so, 295 cents to give it the sense that it's old.
Sure.
But this is a fun book. This also looks well-loved. I like that you enjoyed it.
And I bought, when they came out, I think they did Radioactive Man, Bartman, and then a Simpsons, and then an Itchy and Scratchy. And I own all 4 of those number 1s. And like I said, all my comic books are very well loved.
Well, they also now have a comic book guy comic. They've got a
Ralph. Do they really?
Yes, they do. They've got a Ralph Wiggum comic coming soon.
Great.
So Bongo's still around. Simpsons comics still do well, but I hate to tell you, your Radioactive Man #1 is not worth what Bart and friends paid for.
Oh, what was it, $100?
I think it was $100.
Yeah, I think they all pitched in, and it was $100. And then, it's such a great episode.
It is. It's a really good episode. It's a good comic book episode.
Robert, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being on 24
Thank you.
Frames. For more on this interview and comic book related news and the movies, go to our website, www.thefilmframe.com, and you can check it out all there. Thanks again.
Thanks.